That took some adjusting. Hello. Trying to see if I can put some of the music on. There. Okay. How does that sound? How's the audio on that? Let me know in the comment section down below. Or I guess it's to the side. Is that how Twitch works? It's good? Okay, cool. I'm trying to let the music play slightly in the background so we can hear it a little bit, but at the same time I don't need it in my ears. So trying to keep it quiet on my end. Oh, how are you guys doing today? It's Friday. It's the end of the week. I'm excited. We're gonna be doing some learners series today. I'm pretty sure most of you guys in chat are probably familiar with how to play Pokemon, or maybe you don't, and I'm just a liar, or I don't know how often you guys have played Pokemon before. Let me get the keyboard out of the way real fast. All right. So today's going to be your very intro to Pokemon. This is going to be a session on you've never played Pokemon before and you've literally just picked up the cards. Like maybe you've collected them and you're like, these are cool artwork. I love these. But you don't understand how to read them. And that's kind of what the session's going to be about. It's also going to go into your first ever game. So if you've never actually played a game, you're going to get to see an actual gameplay. Albeit it'll probably be half of a game, and it'll probably be very short, because I'm going to try to not take 2 hours. Yes, Trapinch. Reading the card does explain the card. Yes. A lot of people, though, don't get terminology. What is a trainer and why are there 4 types of trainers? And, why do we have GXs and Vs? And what's the difference? And, yeah, stuff like that. We all have seen the cards and we've all read them and we've read the instructions, but have we really read them is the question. So that's what this session is going to be about. If you guys have any questions as we go through, I'll try to pick them up as I see them. So I'll try to answer them as they go. If you want to hold on to your question until the end, that's also fine. I don't mind. But I'm going to be going through this pretty straightforwardly, and I try not to divert when I teach. Just because if I'm explaining something and somebody asks something completely different and off topic, I might not want to answer that because I don't want to go away from where we're at. So I'll try to incorporate questions as they get asked that are relevant, and then I might come back and pick up ones. Or if I don't answer your question within 5 minutes, hold on to it and maybe ask later, at the end. So we'll do it that way. That is just the best I can do. I saw Bagel said he had a question, but I don't see the question. He said, I have a question, but I don't see him. As far as Andy points go, I will not be doing any requests for Andy points, so please save your Andy points for a different stream. Today I want to focus on doing the session and not, not distracting myself with push-ups and crunches right now. So, all right. With that all out of the way, it's time. I have cleared up a space, as you can see, for a mat. So we'll start by going over. Yeah, it's not Andy table. It's definitely the desk. So I wanted to start with the. What are you doing, Bagel? I want to start off with the basics of the cards. So let me get a couple of cards out for you guys, and we'll take a look at a few of them. So I've got a deck here, and we'll just pull out a few cards. And they will be upside down for now, don't worry. We'll fix that, I promise. You guys aren't going to be able to not read them. And I picked up a few cards earlier. Oh, there he is. I was like, where's my Haunter? I know I have a Haunter. So we got these guys. I've got some trainers. We've got that one. You're going to notice that they're all kind of random. Because I'm pulling them from different places. So. And then the last ones are going to be your favorites. Pog Lapras right there. Cool. All right. I think that covers everything. Muck deck. I'm only going to do standard cards. So we aren't going to be talking about anything that came before Sun and Moon. So level X, EX, those kind of cards we won't talk about really. I might cover them slightly, as in like when we talk about the different types of cards, but I won't focus on them just because I don't need to confuse players with terms that don't actually exist anymore in Standard, which is the type that most players will play. All right, so we'll start with Pokemon, because Pokemon are kind of the bread and butter of this game. So we have a lot of Pokemon cards. Let's flip these guys over so that you can see them. If you'll notice, there's a lot of different types of Pokemon cards. Over the generations, we've gotten different Pokemon cards, different types, but we focused on... I focused on the significant ones. Let's see if we can get those under. The ones that you'll commonly see, all of them that really exist. So right here, we've got our Ghastly. This is our basic Pokemon. Let's get that in frame. That's a basic. And then we've got our Haunter, the evolution of Ghastly. So he is a stage 1, is what we call it. And then we've got Gengar. He's our stage 2. So when you think about evolutions, you've always got your basic, which is that initial Pokemon. You've got your stage 1, which is the evolution, and stage 2, which is the evolution of that. Our special types of cards that exist in the TCG are cards like our Prism Star card, which look like this, and you can see Prism Star right there. And you can also see in the name, right there, is a Prism Star. We've got GX Pokemon, which come in 2 flavors. We've got our normal GX, which again, right there. GX is in the name, and then you'll notice that it has a special text down here at the bottom that says GX as well. And then we've got our Tag Team GXs, which are a special type of card. We'll go over a little bit about Tag Teams later, but just note that it has Tag Team written in the name. And then right up here is the GX. So keep that in mind when we look. And then our newest favorite Pokemon are our V Pokemon cards, which you'll notice at the top, again, has that V in the name. But you'll notice down here at the bottom that there's no GX or that special attack at the bottom. So keep that in mind when we get to these guys. And then up here, we've got our V Max, which has V Max in the name. And you'll notice right here that there's the word Gigantamax. We have a few different types of these. This isn't huge in the game, but in the video game it makes sense when you play it. So not a huge factor in the TCG, but it's nice that they incorporate that into the game. So we'll start with reading a card, because again, reading a card is the most basic. So most cards all have the same format. You'll see at the top right here, you'll see the word basic. Look at that. I don't know if I can get that to focus. There you go. So you'll see basics at the top. You'll also see the name of the Pokemon right there. And then across the way, you'll see the HP and the type. So it's a psychic type. You always have the card artwork. And then right here in the middle is the attacks, the attack cost, the attack name, how much damage it does, and then the effect of the card or the attack right here. Effects come in a few flavors. One of them is mostly just stuff like what to do when you do the attack. Like this one says put the Pokemon and all cards attached into your hand. Some of them will tell you how to damage calculate. And if you've got a damage calculation, you'll usually see the number, and it'll usually have like a plus or a multiply depending on that calculation. So think of the effect as the math behind the damage. At the bottom, you've got your weakness, which is right there, and it's weak to dark. And then you've got your resistance, which he's resistant to fighting. And then you've got your retreat cost, which is 1 right here at the bottom. So we'll talk more about retreating later on. But just keep in mind that that is where the retreat, and you'll notice that it's colorless. The retreat cost will always be listed as colorless for a few reasons. All right. Stage 1s look exactly identical, but you'll notice that at the top, right there, you'll see that it says Stage 1. Get that zoomed in there. Focus. Can you focus? Maybe not. But you'll see it says Stage 1. And then you'll see that it has the Pokemon. And you'll see that it says Evolves from Ghastly. This is kind of important text. We'll talk about evolution later. But it's very important that you note that it says Evolves from Ghastly. Specifically Ghastly. Everything else about the card is still the same. So we still have the attacks, the damage, any effects of the attacks, and our weakness, resistance, and retreat cost. And lastly, our Stage 2, which is our Gengar. Again, has the Evolve, and it says Stage 2. Something that you long-term players might notice is that right over here, there's this little metal band, and there's 2 of them. It's to represent Stage 2. Whereas Haunter, when you look at him, he's only got 1 band, Stage 1. And then Ghastly, he has no band, so he's a basic. So, you might not have noticed that, but it's a clever little detail. It was put into Sun and Moon, or not Sun and Moon, I'm sorry, Sword and Shield, but a lot of players don't actually know that in Sword and Shield that they incorporated that, and I think that's kind of neat to show that kind of that sort of text on the card. So, and then you'll notice that Gengar has an ability. So abilities are labeled right here, and they'll usually tell you what to do with the ability or how you can use them. For this one specifically, it says, as often as you like during your turn, you may move 1 damage counter from one of your Psychic Pokemon to another Psychic Pokemon, which means that I can use this as often as I like during the turn. I don't need to, I'm not limited to 1, and I'm not limited to a specific condition. I can just use it. The only conditions that I have is that I have to do it with a Psychic Pokemon and move it to a Psychic Pokemon. So I can't do this on Fighting Pokemon or anything like that. So kind of important to read the text and see what it does in order to understand the abilities. But we'll see a couple other abilities later on, so you get an idea of different types of abilities. So cool. So what's different about these cards? Let's talk about that real fast. So our Prism Star cards, the rule is actually listed right on the card, which is convenient. Prism Star cards, you're only allowed to have one of the same name in the deck. So up here we've got Tapu Koko Prism Star. So I can't have more than one of Tapu Koko Prism Star. I could have a Tapu Koko Prism Star and a Latios Prism Star. Those work fine, but in this deck specifically, I can't have more than one Tapu Koko Prism Star. The other rule is that if he gets discarded, or if a card would force a Prism Star to discard, you need to send him to the Lost Zone. The Lost Zone is not usually listed on a playmat, but it's typically located right here. It's usually right above your draw and your discard piles. So it's going to be usually right here. This is the top of the board, just a heads up. So it's as if you're sitting in front of this mat. So it's usually right here. Some players will put it actually over here in front of their prizes. But as long as you and your player understand where the Lost Zone is during your play, that's the most important part. So there's not a set location for Lost Zones. So that's where we'd put Tapu Koko. Center that. You'll notice that he also has an ability, and this just says right there. If I can get it to focus. Focus. There you go. Once during your turn, before your attack. So notice how it says once during your turn, and it specifies before the attack. If this Pokemon is on the bench, you may choose 2 of your bench Pokemon and attach a lightning energy card from your discard pile to each of them. If you do, discard all cards from this Pokemon and put him in the Lost Zone. So you'll notice that it specifies when to use it and how often you can use this attack. And you'll notice that at the end, he goes into a Lost Zone, so he'll no longer be in play. So kind of an important point. Our next type is their GX types. The real special thing about GXs is that they can either be evolution or they can be basics. So they don't need to be specifically basics. But they'll be listed up here where they evolve from, and you'll notice that this one just evolves from Venonat like normal. But you'll notice that GXs have these attacks called GX attacks. They'll usually be listed, and then they'll usually have GX at the end. That's a GX attack. GX attacks can only be used once in a game, and to indicate that you've used a GX attack, we use a GX counter, which look like this. It'll usually say GX on it, but most rulings in most regions will say that you should use a token that specifically says GX. So this right here is good as a GX token. Using a card or a sleeve that's flipped over like that is not usually acceptable for a GX token. But if I took a sleeve and I wrote down GX on it, then yeah, I could use that as a GX token. As long as it's really indicative. You cannot, though, take a card, turn it sideways, write GX over the front, and call it a GX token. Because that is still considered a card, regardless of it being marked or written on. So keep that in mind when you're looking for GX tokens. Usually, Pokemon sells them, and they usually come in like ETBs, stuff like that. So, easy way to get a token. Going forward, though, we may not need these in the future. Just keep that in mind. So these may disappear. So, we have GX attacks. You can only use them once per turn. They usually have an effect at the bottom. And then we have one other rule down here at the bottom. Let's see if we can get that zoomed in. There you go. So when your Pokemon GX is knocked out, your opponent takes 2 prize cards. So typically, when a Pokemon is knocked out, your opponent takes, once per game for GX attacks. So typically when a Pokemon gets knocked out, your opponent takes a prize card. So for Ghastly, Haunter, or Gengar, if one of those guys gets knocked out, you would take a prize card for knocking it out. For GX Pokemon, though, we take 2 prize cards. And then we have our tag team GXs. Just look like that. Again, identified by the tag team. Usually has 2 Pokemon on it, so this is Muck and Alolan Muck. And then you'll notice that it has a GX attack still. But you'll notice something big about this one is that it has a plus next to it. Tag Team GX Pokemon have a unique GX attack that has additional effects for additional energy. So this one says that your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed and poisoned. But if you have 4 extra energy attached to it, including the addition of the attack's cost, then you get to put 15 damage counters instead of 1 on that Pokemon between turns. So, if I use this GX attack with no energy attached, I would get just the first effect. But if I put 4 energies on it, regardless of what energy they are, just 4 energies, I would get that effect, plus they would take 15 damage counters instead of 1 between turns for being poisoned. So, big difference on the GX. And yeah, I guess clarification is that if an attack is labeled GX, you can only use one of those ever in a game. So if I use this nasty goo mix, I could not use Venomous, what is that called? 10 card return. I could not use that. So keep that in mind if you have multiple GXs. You want to make sure that you're using the right GX move for the game. Because a GX move can change the game quite a bit. So it's pretty important to keep that in mind when you're looking at a deck. Lastly, again, we have a tag team rule down here. And it says that when your tag team is knocked out, your opponent takes 3 prize cards. So you'll want to keep that in mind about tag team GXs. That an opponent can take 3 prize cards, which is half of your prize cards. The gray circle, yes. So that gray circle right there that Mary's pointing out, that means that there is no energy cost required for this. So this is an empty energy. So it doesn't require anything to play that. But if I want the additional effect, I still have to put 4 Pokemon or 4 energy on this Pokemon in order to use the additional effect. So we've got that. Our V Pokemon and V Max Pokemon are less complicated. We'll start with the V Pokemon, and again, it's a V Pokemon, and they're always basic. And then they have the normal attacks, but it has that GX rule down here called the V rule, which says that if a Pokemon V is knocked out, your opponent takes 2 prize cards. So this is basically just like a GX Pokemon, except it doesn't have the GX attack on it anymore. So keep that in mind. And then our V Max Pokemon, you'll notice something unique about this is that the evolution specifically states that he evolves from Lapras V. Note that there's a V in the name. This is really important with these Pokemon cards. We'll get to that in just a second, but keep that in mind real quick. But you'll also notice that the VMAX rule is just like the Tag Team GX rule. If he's knocked out, your opponent takes 3 prize cards instead of 2, or instead of 1. And you'll notice that there is no GX attack, but most VMAX Pokemon have this attack that says Gmax. So it'll say something like Gmax and then the attack. This is kind of just putting it in line with the video games. So kind of neat to see that. So Pokemon names. Really important about Pokemon names. We stress it a lot in the TCG because wording is really important when evolution happens. So when a Pokemon evolves, it has to evolve from the Pokemon that's named. So we'll take Eevee for instance. Eevee exists, and Flareon would evolve from Eevee. But we have an Eevee GX. Could Eevee GX evolve into Flareon? No. The reason being is because Flareon or Flareon GX both say that they evolved from Eevee specifically, not Eevee GX. So we could not evolve Eevee GX into a Flareon or a Flareon GX. Just like we couldn't evolve Eevee on the ball, the new Pokemon that we recently found out about, he would not evolve into a Flareon or a Jolteon or a Vaporeon because those cards specifically state Eevee on the card. Just like our Lapras VMAX specifically states that he evolves from Lapras V. So this VMAX could not evolve from a normal Lapras at any point. It needs to be a Lapras V. Some abilities will let you exclude that power. That EVGX that we were talking about, his ability actually states that he can evolve into any Pokemon that evolves from Eevee. So he kind of bypasses the rule by using the ability, but it's only because of the ability. So really important to read cards, and it's very important to know what's in the name of a card. Keep in mind that GX, V, VMAX, those are all part of the name. Same with in the expanded version, we have EX lowercase and EX uppercase. Prism Star is actually even part of the name too. So like Tapu Koko Prism Star, if he had an evolution, he could not evolve into it because he's a Prism Star, not a regular card. The only exception to that rule is the level X. Level X Pokemon, the level X is not actually part of the name. It's actually part of the level. So it's considered the same name, which is just, Alakazam is just Alakazam, even if it has the level X afterwards. So, I think that's enough of Pokemon. I think we've gone through most of the Pokemon that are important in this game. So we'll clear this space up and we'll talk about some trainers real fast. Trainers will be a lot shorter of a section, I promise. Pokemon there's a lot of Pokemon and a lot of versions of Pokemon. So, it gets tricky. Alright, so we've got trainers. There are 4 different types of trainers that you can see. We've got our supporters. We've got our stadiums. We've also got items, but items come in 2 categories. So we've got both this one, and then we've got a Pokemon tool that can be put in there. We'll start with items because they're the most common ones. So your typical item, it's a trainer card. It's labeled as trainer, and then it'll be labeled as an item card. So if a card says look for an item card, it's going to be looking for this text. If it says look for a trainer card, it's just looking for this text. So all trainers are all cards in the trainer class are trainers, but not all cards in the trainer class are items. So by name. Items can be played at any time during your turn before your attack, and you can play as many of them as you want in a turn. So I could play 4 quick balls in a turn if I wanted to, as long as I had enough cards to play it, because this does require that you discard a card. And all you do for playing trainers is you just read the text and follow the text. And that's it. Pretty simple. For tools, though, Pokemon tools are attached to Pokemon instead. Again, you can play as many of these as you want in a turn. So if I wanted to attach 4 lucky eggs to 4 different Pokemon, I could. But a Pokemon is limited to 1 tool per Pokemon. And tools cannot be removed unless an effect tells you to. Some Pokemon have had abilities that say remove the tool attached to your Pokemon, or to this Pokemon. And so that would let you remove them. But otherwise, tools are permanent. They cannot be changed. So you cannot remove it. You cannot replace it. It's just on there for good. And then you'll usually follow the instructions on the card depending on when it's played. So this one specifically says that if the Pokemon it's attached to is knocked out by damage taken by your opponent's attack, you get to draw cards until you have 7 cards in your hand. There you go. Until you have 7 cards in your hand. So this tool takes effect when your opponent is, or when your Pokemon is knocked out. And keep in mind that the wording specifically says knocked out by damage from your opponent's attacks. So if this Pokemon were knocked out as a result of taking damage counters while on the bench from an ability, it would not count, and this would just get discarded. So that's trainers, or specifically items. So we'll talk about the other two. So we'll talk about stadiums. So we've got stadiums. Again, it'll be labeled a stadium at the top, and it'll tell you what you can do. Stadiums take effect for both players. When you play a stadium, it'll usually go between your opponent and you. So usually right up here, or it'll be turned sideways like that. So both players understand that there's a stadium in play. And the text will usually say what you or your opponent can do. So it says once during each player's turn, they may discard a card from their hand. If they do, that player searches for their deck for basic energy, reveals it, and puts it into their hand. And then they have to shuffle their deck. There's a few unstated rules about stadiums. One is that you can only play 1 stadium per turn. And a stadium stays in play. If another stadium comes into play, you discard the previous stadium. One exception being is that Stadium Prism Star cards cannot be removed by abilities or tools, or trainers, I guess. They have to be removed by replacing them with another stadium. And then it gets discarded when another card comes in play. And then note that at the bottom it says, if another card with the same name is in play, you can't play this card. So I can't play a Viridian Forest on top of a Viridian Forest, because it's already in play. Lastly, our supporters. I specifically pulled out a tag team supporter because I wanted to note that supporters come in tag teams as well, and they'll be labeled with tag team as well. But all supporters will still have the supporter moniker right there, and then they'll have their name. Can you replace your own stadium with another? You cannot, because again, you can only play 1 stadium per turn. So if I play Viridian Forest, I can't then play Black Market Prism Star on top of that, because I played a stadium on my turn. I could, on my next turn replace it with my own with another stadium. So if I played Viridian Forest, then on the next turn I can play Black Stadium Prism Star, or Black Market Prism Star, and that would work. Yep. So supporters, the one unique rule with supporters is that you can only play 1 per turn. You may play 1 supporter card during your turn before your attack. That's important to note. Trainers have the same effect. There's an effect listed that'll tell you what to do. But you'll notice that tag teams, I'm totally forgetting my words for a second, they usually have an additional effect that requires you to discard cards. So this one says when you play this card, you may discard 2 cards from your hand. If you do, search your deck for up to 2 basic energies and attach to your Pokemon you evolve this way. So red and blue have 2 effects. One is to search your deck for a Pokemon GX that evolves from one of your basics, or one of your Pokemon on bench. And then if you discard 2 other cards from your hand as well, you get to go searching for 2 basic energy cards to put it on that Pokemon. So, those would be supporters. When any player plays an item or supporter card from their hand, prevent all effects of the card done to the stadium card. For reference, this shows what does not affect Prism Star stadium cards. There you go. Yep. Thank you. I forgot to pull out a Prism Star card, or a Prism Star stadium card. But yeah, Strong has the wordings. So abilities would work. Whenever you play an item or a supporter card from your hand, prevent all effects. Okay. Yeah, so items or supporters are the only ones. So abilities do affect it. And attacks would also affect it as well. So, so items and supporters being a supporter that tells you that you can discard the stadium, that would not work. Or an item that says to discard the stadium, that would also not work as well. Cool. All right, so we've covered all of the cards. I did want to pull out one more card to talk about before we talk about setup and gameplay and turn orders. Find the cards that I was looking for. There we go. These guys. Cool. So we normally have energies. This is what an energy looks like. Usually has an energy symbol at the top. This is a psychic energy card. But we also have special energies, like this horror energy. So special energies will say that they're special. So it says special energy right here. And they are not considered basic energies. So if you ever read a card text that says, search your deck for a basic energy card, these are not basic energy cards. A deck or a special energy usually also has a requirement that it needs to be attached to a Pokemon. So right here it says, as long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides psychic energy. This is really important because some cards also just say, search your deck for a psychic energy card. This will not count as a psychic energy card, even though it has the psychic energy at the top. The reason being is because the text specifically says that it only counts as a psychic energy when it's attached to a Pokemon. Super important to read that text when you're looking at special energy cards. Some special energy cards say that they count as a colorless energy when not attached, and some cards say that while they're in the deck they count as a certain type of energy. But most of these special energies require that they be attached to a Pokemon before they count as an energy. And then they'll usually have an additional effect attached to it. So this one says that if it's attached to a psychic Pokemon and it's in the active spot and it's damaged by an opponent's attack, even if it's knocked out, you get to put 2 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So, comes in handy for some of the psychic decks. Alright, so that is energy cards. So not even if a trainer has just the energy symbols can you search for the special. Correct. Because that symbol at the top right does not actually indicate it's an energy card. It's indication of what could be as an energy card. For reference, we had an expanded a card called Double Dragon Energy, and at the top right corner it had 2 dragon energy symbols, but it counted as every color energy while it was attached to a dragon type Pokemon. So they usually use that as stylistic choices rather than as a thing to say, hey, this energy card or this card is this type energy card. All right, so let's move on. We'll talk about setup and play while I shuffle my deck. I'll give you a thing that I learned when learning how to play Pokemon. Your turn order is an acronym that I like to use called DATA, and that stands for Draw, Attach, Trainer, and Attack. This was the original acronym for Ripple Shuffle, I dare you. Sure, I'll Ripple Shuffle. This was the original acronym for the game, back when it was very simple to play, because trainers were just trainers. They weren't supporters and items and so on. So, data is the easiest way to remember everything, and we'll go through that turn order as we go through a turn. But keep that in the back of your brain, that A turn order is called data. All right, so we've got our deck shuffled. We'll talk about shuffling more in a future lesson because there are several shuffle types and some shuffles only count certain ways. So before you set up, you always have to flip a coin to see who goes first. Some players also like to do a dice. When you roll a dice, your heads are always your even numbers, and your odds are always your tails. So keep that in mind when you play with somebody who doesn't want to flip a coin. I don't flip coins. I usually roll dice. Rolling dice are much easier to control. So one person would roll the dice, call it, or the other person would call it, and then depending on what it lands on, so this is a heads, would be who goes first or who gets to decide who goes first. Let's see. Peers won't work. Something like Peers from Darkness Ablaze will work, though, because it just says energy. I'd have to remember what Peers look like. I think it does. If I remember correctly, it does work because it just says energy. And special energies are still considered energy cards in the sense. But if it says basic dark energy, it will not work. Because it needs to say, or that card needs to be a basic dark energy. I don't have a Pierce on me right now. There's a Pierce behind me somewhere. I don't want to go looking for it right now because that'll be very difficult. So we can look at that later. All right, so once you've decided who goes first, you get to draw your hand. So your initial hand should be 7 cards. So there's 3 and 4. Search your deck for an energy card and a darkness Pokemon. Reveal them and put them into your hand. Yep. If that is the text that Strunk says, search your deck for an energy card and a darkness Pokemon, then yes, you can search for a special energy card. It does not need to be basic. It can be a special energy in that sense. Welcome back, Bagel. Alright, so I've drawn my 7 cards. This is my hand. We would look at our hand, and we're looking for a basic Pokemon, which, rip, I did not pull a basic Pokemon. So you'll notice I have 2 energy cards and all trainers. This is actually a mulligan, and this is good for us right now. So a mulligan, you would show your opponent your hand. So this is what I have. And then you would shuffle that back into your deck. And your opponent will usually grab a dice. And they'll stack the dice onto their deck. Or they'll put it to the side. That's a counter to say that I've had 1 mulligan. The reason being is because once you finally set up and put down Pokemon, your opponent can grab up to the number of cards that you mulliganed. So if they had 3 mulligans, they could draw up to 3 cards. But they have to decide before they draw. So if they have 3 and they decide, I only want to draw 2 cards, they can draw those 2 cards, but they can't then decide, hey, I want to grab my 3rd card. So you'll have to make sure that you decide beforehand how many you want to draw. Sometimes that only happens one time, and in that case you just decide if you want to draw 1 or none. But if you manage to get to a situation where your opponent has mulliganed 6 times, it may not be a good idea to draw all 6. So make sure that you decide and make sure it's a good option for you. So we'll go ahead and draw our 7 cards. Yep, we're all here to learn, so no worries. Alright, so we'll look at our hands. You'll notice that I have a Haunter. He's not a basic Pokemon, so he won't count. But I do have a Gengar Mimikyu, who is a basic, and he's notated right there in the corner. So he gets to go down. He goes down face up. Or face down, sorry. And again, remember that you're looking at this camera view as if you were me in the player. So this is your bench, and here's your active Pokemon. So we now have our hand, And we now have our active Pokemon. At this point, if our opponent mulliganed, we'd get to draw our mulligan. If, let's say, both players mulligan one time, neither player gets to draw an extra card. It kind of cancels out. If you do draw a card from a mulligan and it's a basic Pokemon, you can opt to put it into your bench right away. You don't have to wait until the end of your turn. Think of mulligans as an addition of your hand to start. So we're going to say that we didn't have any mulligans, so we don't have any bench Pokemon to start with. Once we're done, go ahead and move that out of the way. We're going to go ahead and put our prizes down. So we're going to do 6 prizes. This is usually what matches are, is 6 prizes. And they'll go on the side of the mat where the prize markers are on this mat. And then our deck goes up here, and our discard pile is close to us right here. And that's the setup right there. So once you've got everything set up and your opponent's set up, you'll go ahead and reveal. And then your first player will, start. On the first turn, your first player cannot attack and cannot use a supporter card. Very important to remember that when you're playing. I'm going to go ahead and set my hand, or the hand, right here for now, so that you guys can see. And we're going to go first, since we won the coin flip, I guess. So we'll draw a card. We'll add it to our hand. And you'll notice it's basic Pokemon. So we can play that card first, if we wanted to. So, at this point, our turn has started. We've drawn our card. And now we have the two things that we can do. Attach and play trainer cards. Again, we can't play supporters during the first turn. But we can do this in any order. So I can play trainers before I attach. I can play basic Pokemon down if I want to. And on the first turn, I can't evolve any Pokemon. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to move these guys way down here. I'm going to go ahead and play that Wobbuffet that we just drew, because he's a basic Pokemon. And we'll put him in our bench, just right there. And you'll notice that we have a tool in our hand. It's a trainer. Let's go ahead and get that attached to our Wobbuffet. So when we attach them on the bench, I usually like to put them like this, where they're kind of just peeking out. But if it's on your active, I always like to put it to the side like that. So it's a little bit more visible for your opponent to look at. And if they need the text, they can pull it out and read it. But we're going to go ahead and put it on our Wobbuffet. And then we're actually going to put our air balloon on our Gengar Mimikyu. So you'll notice that I've played 2 trainer cards. They're both trainer cards, and they're both tool cards. But I could not play the air balloon on top of Wobbuffet because he already has a tool attached. So he's just going to go over here onto Gengar, like that. Gengar Mimikyu. Alright. So, we've got 4 cards left in our hand. One of them is a supporter, so we can't play the supporter. And one of them is a stage 2 on a Gengar, or a Ghastly, so we can't play that either. So we'll put those guys aside. And then we've got a Switch, and we've got a Pokegear. I like where my Gengar Mimikyu is, so I'm going to keep him there. But I do have this Pokegear right now. I could use this right now to see if I can find a supporter. But I already have a supporter in hand, and I'm kind of satisfied with the supporter that I've got right now. So I'm going to opt not to do anything else. And because I can't attack, both because it's the first turn, and because I don't have any energy attached to him, I have to pass. So I would say pass, and my player would start, or my opponent would start their turn. And they're going to go through the same steps that we just did. Draw, attach, trainer, and attack. So let's say that our opponent did all of that, but they couldn't attack on their first turn either. Maybe because they didn't have enough energy, or they didn't get to attach an energy, something like that. So we're going to say that at this point it's back to our turn again. So we're going to draw a card. And look at that. We got our Ghastly. And he's a basic right there. So I'm going to go ahead and play him. We'll put him on the bench. And then now we can play that supporter that we got. So it says right here on the supporter that each player shuffles their hand and puts it at the bottom of their deck. And then they draw either 5 cards or 4 cards, depending on who they are. So I'm going to go ahead and play that. And the way that you would play these cards, supporters, because you're only limited to 1 per turn, the way that I usually recommend, you don't have to do this, but usually recommended, is I usually like to put them up here in the corner. So you'll notice that my mat has these 2 blank spots right here. One blank spot is for the trainer, and one blank spot is actually for the stadium. So I usually put my supporter up here in the corner to indicate that I'm playing the supporter. So it's here. So my opponent now knows that I'm playing Marnie, and I will also say, I'm going to play Marnie. I'm going to take my hand. We would shuffle it up. And we usually offer our opponent to cut or tap. So I would just cut, or my opponent would cut. And then I get to put it at the bottom of the deck. So we're going to put it at the bottom. And then because I played Marnie, I get to draw 5. Five cards. Look at that. Alright, so at this point I can either put this guy in the discard now, because I'm done. I've resolved the effects of this card. Some people will leave it out as a reminder to say, hey, I've used my supporter for the turn. I don't want to do this. But I'm going to go ahead and put it in the discard pile. And we're going to remember that we already played a supporter for the turn. Because of that, we can't play Blaine or Marnie. But we did get this energy, and we did get this quick ball. So we'll go ahead and attach the energy to Gengar Mimikyu. And again, I like to put it so that it's just peeking out, so that your opponent can see that there's an energy attached to it. And then I'm going to play the quick ball, which the quick ball requires me to discard a card in order to play it. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to discard the Marnie, because I don't really need the Marnie now at this point. I don't need a second Marnie at least. And for this one, we'll usually do... no problem, Mary. Hopefully you can tune into the VOD after this. So usually when we play stuff like this, where we're playing the quick ball and we're discarding a card, we'll usually put it up front to show our opponent, hey, I'm playing this, and I'm discarding a Marnie. Just make sure that you're announcing what's going on. And then we're going to go ahead and search for a card. And it says you can play this card if you discard a card. Search your deck for a basic Pokemon. So we have to search our deck for a basic. I'm going to search for this Dusknoir Trevenant that's in here. Again, it's labeled as a basic, so I get to grab him if I wanted to. And it says to put it in your hand. You would always reveal it to your opponent. So I would say, I'm going to grab this Dusknoir Trevenant, put it in your hand. And the reason that you reveal is because you're kind of giving your opponent proof that you grabbed the Pokemon or the card that your card requires you to grab. And then I'll go ahead and shuffle the deck. So we're doing a little bit of mass shuffling. And then we'd usually offer our opponent to cut or tap. So we'll just say that our opponent cuts. We'll set it back down. And now these two, because the card is resolved just like before, we're going to go ahead and discard them. Now I have these guys. I'm going to actually hold on to Dusknoir Trevenant. Because I need a Pokemon for Blaine, and I think I want to play Blaine next. So I'm going to hold on to this and keep my hand as is. And now, I do actually have enough energy to play the Horror House GX. And again, remember that tag teams have the extra effect on them for playing extra energy. I only have the 1 energy. That's totally fine. I'm going to go ahead and play that. So, you would take your tag team GX marker, and you just flip it over to indicate that you've played it. And now Horror House says your opponent can't play any cards during their next turn. And that's it. The rest of it is that if you have extra energy attached, you would get to draw cards until you have a certain number in your hand. We're not going to do that, so we're going to leave that as is. And then it would be our opponent's turn because we've attacked. Our opponent would go through their turn. Again, draw, attach, trainer, attack. Our opponent couldn't play any trainers, and they couldn't play any energies, so all they did was draw, and because they couldn't play any energies, they probably didn't have enough energy to attack. So they're going to also pass their turn again. So it's going to come back to me again. So, I'm going to draw a card to start my turn. And now, I have this card. And remember that we showed our opponent this card. So, this one's well known to the opponent. This one's not so much well known to the opponent. The opponent may not actually even know what this attack is. So we're going to play Blaine's Quiz Show, which is a great card. I love it. Basically, it says put a Pokemon from your hand down in front of you and tell your opponent the name of an attack it has. And then your opponent has to guess the Pokemon the attack is associated with. Oh, let's see if we can get some focus. Come on, bud. Oh. I don't think I'll get a focus on that one. But they guess, and then if they guess right, they get to draw 4 cards. If they guess wrong, I get to draw 4 cards. So I would play that guy out, and then I'd put down Gengar. Put the card down, and then I would tell my opponent an attack. So for this instance, I would say Hypnoblast. And remember, it says attack, so abilities don't count here. So it's just the attack, which is Hypnoblast. And let's say my opponent guesses wrong, thinks it's a Haunter, not a Gengar. I would reveal to say it's Gengar. And then I get to draw my 4 cards, because I won. So I get to draw 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. All right. Gengar doesn't get discarded. Oh boy. Okay. Cactus. Let's not spam. All right. So we're gonna discard Blaine now because we're done with that card. We've resolved its effects. And now we have a few card options. So I do want to play the Dusknoir Trevenant now. So I'm gonna put it up. And then we also got this Rare Candy, which was really fortunate for us. So Rare Candy, I get to play this card, and I get to evolve a basic Pokemon to its stage 2, right on top from the card, as long as it evolved from its original stage 1. So I'm going to say I'm playing Rare Candy, and put Gengar over Ghastly, and discard. So you notice that I resolve the effect before the card goes into the discard pile, because I always want to make sure that I'm resolving first. And then we'll attach an energy to our turn, for our turn. So we'll do the Psychic Energy. We'll stack it up right there. And I actually like where I'm at right now. I'm going to keep everything in here just like it is. And I'm going to go ahead and use my attack, the Poltergeist, not Poltegeist, that's a Pokemon. Because now I have the 2 energy requirements, and I'm going to go ahead and attack. I would do 50 times the number of damage that my opponent has trainer cards in hand. So if you read it and you see it, it's got the 50 times symbol over there, which means that there's math. It says your opponent reveals their hand. This attack does 50 damage times the number of trainer cards you find there. So my opponent would reveal their hand. I would do damage based on the number. And let's say they had quite a bit. Let's say they had a good number, and it was a knockout for my opponent. If it were a basic Pokemon, I would then get to draw a prize card from here. Any prize card. So we'll just take this one. And it goes into my hand. Just like that. If it were a GX Pokemon, I would get to draw 2 prize cards. Like that. And if I knocked out a Tag Team GX or a VMAX Pokemon, we'd be sitting at 3 prize cards. So you can see right there that knocking out a Tag Team GX, I've already gotten up to 3 prizes right there. Pretty easily. Flashback to the time I got smashed by Gengar Q deck. This is my favorite deck, the Gengar Q deck. We all know this deck. And that would be it. After I draw my prize cards, my opponent would have to promote a Pokemon, and then it would be their turn. So let's say on their turn, they drew, they attached, they played a trainer, and they were actually able to knock out my Gengar Mimikyu. Say it was an Eternatus, and they did a lot of damage to knock me out. The way I'd represent that, if they did damage, is with damage counters. We have damage counters right here. They're usually dice. So let's say my opponent did 120. I would just do 120 there. Just like that. If they did more than 120, let's say they did 200 damage, I could take 180 and then just mark it up with a 20. Just like that. And let's say they did 220 damage. Easy way to represent that is actually by taking the 20 and putting it right on top of the HP mark like that. If you notice, I'm covering the HP mark. That means that I'm telling my opponent I've only got 20 HP left. So that way I don't have to put 220 damage tokens on my card. Cora, thank you. If you're using the old-fashioned dice like this, where it has what we call pips, these little dots on here, each pip represents 10 damage. So in this case, to represent 60 damage, I would have to do this guy right there with the 6 on it. If I wanted to represent 120 damage, I'd have to put 2 of them on there like that. And then again, if I wanted to do 220, I could do that same technique where I take and I put the 2 down like that. And I just put it right on top of the 240 to mark that I only have 20 HP left. This is, I think, the best way to represent very high damage counts because it's easier to say I only have 20 HP left than to say I have 220 HP or 220 damage taken. So, easy way to mark that. But let's say he knocked out my Gengar Mimikyu because I didn't see an Eternatus coming or something like that. To represent that it got knocked out, I would put all the cards together, turn it sideways, and then if there's any resolution to the knockout, let's say I deal extra damage from a horror damage or a horror energy, or if an attack or an item on me affected the opponent, I would resolve that. And then I discard. Just like that. So now he's discarded. My opponent would take prize cards. And then I get to promote a card. So I'm going to promote my Wobbuffet right there. And then it would be my turn again. And I would draw again. And then play would continue throughout until the first player draws all of their prize cards. So we could say at the end of the game, I took all 6 prize cards. Just like that. And then that would mean that I'd win. Right there. That is basically what a game looks like. When you're not playing PTCGO, there's a lot of extra stuff that go on, especially like shuffling or understanding a few of the cards that you would be playing with. The last thing I would suggest before I wrap up the session is that when you're playing games, there's 2 different types of dice that you usually have. You usually have a damage dice, and you usually have a rolling dice. Rolling dice, for tournament stakes, are specifically clear. So remember that, is that if you want to roll a dice to flip for heads or tails, clear dice. Only clear dice. What are other ways to win and lose the game? So, there are 2 other ways that you can win or lose the game. So in this case, we drew all our prizes in order to win. Another example would be is that if I no longer have any Pokemon in play, my opponent would win. So if my opponent knocks out my last Pokemon, but doesn't take the last prize card, they still win. Because I no longer have any Pokemon to play with at that point. The last method is to completely deck out. So if I no longer have a deck, and now everything's in my discard pile, minus, let's say 4 cards and a Pokemon. Like that. If it starts my turn, and I have no deck to draw from, I lose. Because I need to be able to draw in order to start my turn. So, you'd want to make sure that you don't deck out. And then, very important is hand size. There is no limit to the hand size. In fact, there's actually a Pokemon that has an ability that says that you win if you have 33 cards in hand. Or 35 cards in hand, I think it is. So, if you played that, and you had him in the active, and you had 35 cards in your hand, you win. Sometimes it's very interesting. Yeah, it's 35. I corrected myself. I got there. Don't worry. So those would be ways to win. And I believe that, it rotated out and it's banned and expanded. So, not playable, but it exists. And that's the fun part about it. So, I believe that covers all of our basics. We talked about the different Pokemon cards. We talked about the different trainer cards. Talked about the different energy cards. One thing that we didn't cover was attaching energy for turn. You're only allowed to attach 1 energy per turn, unless you have a Pokemon's ability that says otherwise, like Frostmoth, who says you can attach as many water energies per turn. Or Eternatus... No, not Eternatus, I'm sorry. Who is it? Hydreigon. Hydreigon's the one I'm looking for. Who says that you can attach as many dark energy per turn. Yeah. Or Porygon Z, attach as many special energies per turn. Yep. Got a lot of them. But those are the two things that you want to remember is that energy and supporters are limited to one per turn when you play. But you can play as many trainers as you want, and you can play as many Pokemon as you want, as long as they're basics. And then evolution, you can only evolve on the turn it was not played. So if you play it, you can't evolve it on the same turn. Even if you use something like Rare Candy, you have to wait until the next turn in order to evolve it. Cool. I think we've got everything. I'll give it a second for anybody if anybody has any questions. While I go ahead and put some cards away. Oh, hi Alex. We just actually finished a learner session. One of the Discord servers that I run was interested in learning how to play Pokemon, so we did a learner session on playing Pokemon. And we're just actually wrapping up for it too. Nice, Tripinch. Is it anything like my deck, though, is the question. That's the important thing. With Item Lock Omastar. I actually had an Item Lock Omastar. I ran a deck like that, too, back when that was a popular option. I've run a few variations of Gengar Mimikyu. Your deck is like Wob deck. Yeah, this is the Wob deck that I was playing. But yeah, it's gone through a couple iterations. The first one was the item lock, and then I also had the version where it was either Trashalanche or Gengar Mimikyu. And now we're at the iteration of Wobbuffet. So, all right, I think no other questions right now, so I think we'll call it here. Say that this is the end of session 1. We'll try to get session 2 done next week. So if you're looking for session 2 will actually be about intro to competitive. So we'll talk about earning points. We may have a guest star on the episode. So keep an eye out for that one. There will be less viewing of cards like we had right now. And more of a sit-down sort of podcast feel. We'll talk about a lot of things. It's the one I want to be in, but like 2 a.m. again. Yeah, Corey, I got it. Well, we'll try it. We'll see how it works. Because our guest is in Australia, so he has a certain time limit as well. So, but we'll see. We'll find out. There's a lot more questions involved in session 2 anyway. So, but we'll definitely try to get questions answered and go through it. It'll be basically the intro to earning points and what a tournament looks like and what are formats, stuff like that. Cool. Well, thank you guys for being here. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for asking questions. I hope you guys learned quite a bit. I hope you guys had a good time, and hope to see you next week.